Hey, welcome to our Thursday night New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, which is January 15th, 2026, our second meeting of the year. I failed to mention last week, this is actually our seventh year of doing these Zooms. We started
Wow.
in the fall of 2020. So 2020,
Yes.
21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 7. Unreal. Anyway, tonight we have the master of Latino baseball, Tom Van Hyning, who's been on a few times, and he's going to talk tonight about Valmy Thomas, Giant, New York Giant and San Francisco Giant catcher. Next week we have John McLaughlin. Next Thursday, John's going to be talking about the relocation of teams, and of course, in particular, the New York Giants. Uh, Yesterday, I sent out a YouTube video. It was like 10 minutes long. It was just about how our group got established. I was a guest speaker on a Zoom years ago explaining everything, but I thought since we have so many new people, I'd bring everybody up to date. And instead of speaking for an hour, it was just me talking for 10 minutes. So a couple of other things. Last week I mentioned about a plaque next to Willie Mays's apartment at the near the Polo Grounds, St. Nicholas Place, now Willie Mays Place. And they actually answered me, which was incredible. The lady was so nice, and she said that they only do historic buildings. And I said, that's great, but I really wanted a plaque, not a plaque, a marker that would a marker, embedded into the ground, standing up, that said that Willie Mays not only lived there, but made stickball what it was in 1951 to honor Mays for his 95th birthday. I have not heard from them as of yet. I don't know if I will, but if I don't, I'll speak to the other woman. Maybe she could speak to them as well. But I was really surprised that I heard from them. And I'm going to be speaking to one of the Giants executives regarding some other plan I have regarding something else. And I don't want to speak about it now on this. So I'll speak to her first and then I'll report back to you. So uh, in any case, let's all welcome back Tom Van Hyning. Tom, welcome back. I am going to share my screen with you so you can talk.
Right.
Share. And we're going to do this.
We're going to have 80 slides, so I'll probably have to go fairly quickly.
Okay. All right. How does that, you see that, Tom?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
And we'll start right. And of course, you have my name and some of my I always like to use an Albert Einstein quote as an icebreaker. So I hope that not everything that counts is counted. Not everything that is counted is worth counting. I think that's pretty neat. Next slide, please.
Hold on.
Yeah. Or maybe I can click it.
No, you can't. There you go.
I can't. Okay, you can click it. Right. Okay. Well, Valmy Thomas, even though he was born in Santurce, Puerto Rico, October 21st of 1925, he's really a lifetime Crucian from St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands. Santurce obviously had better medical facilities, so Valmy's mom made a decision to get Valmy to Puerto Rico and then back to St. Croix. Next slide, please. You might find this interesting with some of the things that are being discussed in the world today, but Denmark actually sold the U.S. Virgin Islands to the United States of America back in March 31st of 1917 for $25 million in gold. That was quite a bit of money back then. I believe it came in handy because of World War I. Woodrow Wilson and Congress were for this. Obviously, there was German submarine activity during World War I throughout the Caribbean and casualties as well. Ironically, people from Puerto Rico, residents of Puerto Rico, also were awarded U.S. citizenship in early March of 1917, 19 years after the 1898 invasion of Puerto Rico that resulted in Spain losing Puerto Rico as a possession. Virgin Islanders became U.S. citizens back in 1932. Puerto Rico's first governor was elected under the U.S. You know, umbrella back in 1948. Luis Munoz Marin. The Virgin Islanders started electing governors in November of 1970. Next slide, please. You may find this interesting, but when the New York Giants won the pennant in 1933, they also beat Washington in the World Series. Well, Paul Richards from Waxahachie, Texas, was their backup catcher. He was one of Valmy's managers with the 1960 Baltimore Orioles. An interesting story about him was Paul Richards was interested in Caribbean and Panama baseball going back to the mid-30s. He even played a little kind of water ball there, semi-pro ball, and he scouted a left-handed pitcher named Charlie Pescod. Time won't permit me to talk about Charlie, so we'll go to the next slide. Roosevelt Roads is a long-term U.S. naval base in Puerto Rico on the East Coast. Ironically, it closed in 2004, and due to this recent activity in Venezuela, Rosie Roads was activated within the past few months and served as a launching pad for the special operation which took out Nicolas Maduro. Valmy Thomas played an important role as a member of the U.S. Navy for 6 years. He also, many may or may not know this, but he helped dispose of bombs in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So Valmy Thomas was very, when I spoke to him 20 years ago, he was very familiar with Rosie Roads. Next slide, please. Valmy, even though he lived in St. Croix at the time, but of course was involved in the U.S. Navy, he was a fairly good amateur baseball player, and Valmy Thomas represented Puerto Rico in the late 1947 Amateur World Series, played on the Colombia coast in Cartagena. Puerto Rico made it to the finals, but were defeated by the host country. Puerto Rico did defeat Nicaragua. Ironically, 25 years after this Amateur World Series, the legendary Roberto Clemente managed Puerto Rico and Nicaragua in the 1972 Amateur World Series. Next slide, please. Valmy first had a tryout with San Juan Senators. They were Santurce's arch rival. Virgin Islander Alfonso Gerard convinced Pedrin Zorrilla, who owned Santurce, to sign Valmy for 50-51. Apparently, the Senators of San Juan were not that interested. Ruben Gomez, who I became a friend with back in the mid-60s, Ruben met Valmy Thomas, and they became basically lifelong friends. Next slide. Right, and Valmy was a Santurce crabber for 13 years. That was my boyhood team. I became a Santurce fan. Ironically, I became a Santurce fan pretty much shortly after Valmy retired, which is kind of ironic. Valmy's rookie season resulted in him being named Puerto Rico Winter League Rookie of the Year, had a .302 batting average for George Scales. If you recall, George Scales has had several close experiences, nearly making it to Cooperstown. And personally, I believe that George Scales someday should be inducted in Cooperstown for his playing and managing in the Negro Leagues. Santurce that year had a very good lineup with Willard Brown and Bob Thurman, Buster Clarkson, Junior Gilliam. In Puerto Rico, they called him Junior Gilliam. And Alfonso Gerard was a very good left-handed hitter. Ruben Gomez showed how good he was, winning 13 games for the Crabbers, who were 48-30. Next slide, please. In Puerto Rico, Valmy wore number 14. This slide tells you or gives you a little mini roster of some of the pitchers he caught in Puerto Rico, from Ruben Gomez all the way to Sam McDowell. Obviously, Steve Ridzik pitched for the Giants, not very long. Bob Gibson, Hall of Famer, pitched to Valmy in 61-62, as did Craig Anderson, one of the top pitchers for the 1962 New York Mets that was mentioned a few minutes ago, the team that went 40 wins and 120 losses. Tommy Lasorda also pitched to Valmy, as did Pete Burnside, a nice hard-throwing lefty. Next slide, please.
1 second, Tom.
Okay.
Um, since I'm sharing the screen, somebody in the background is talking. You're being very rude. Please mute. The only person who should be talking is Tom. I'm sorry, Tom.
Okay, no problem. This is the famous Pepe Lucas. His real name was Jose St. Clair. Pepe was from the Dominican Republic, a good friend of Ruben Gomez as well. And Ruben and Pepe used to do a lot of fishing. And Pepe was not a great hitter, but as we'll see in a minute, he hit the shot heard across the Caribbean. Next slide, please. Right on February. This was before Bobby Thompson's famous home run in the fall of 51. On February 17th of that year, in Game 7 of the final series, Santurce won their first championship in Puerto Rico on a walk-off homer by Pepe Lucas. The pitcher was Mike Clark, and Mike told me in an interview over the phone that he was so disgusted with himself that as he walked off the field, he threw his glove into the stands of Escobar Stadium. Luis Rafael Cabrera, the voodoo practitioner from Ponce, Puerto Rico, was the winning pitcher, and another close friend of Ruben Gomez. Quick story: Cabrera was so caught up with voodoo that he summoned a voodoo practitioner from his hometown of Ponce, who took a 4-hour plus ride to the stadium that day so that she could give him good luck. And Cabrera pitched better after she got her seat in the third inning. Next slide, please. This is thanks to Jorge Colon Delgado, great research work. This is a photo from an article I wrote for Jorge's website, baseball101.com. You'll see that the owner, Pedrin Zorrilla, is seated next to Pepe Lucas. Diana Zorrilla, a very nice lady who lived to be in her late 90s, is in the middle. Cabrera is seated next to Ruben Gomez on the far right, and they're obviously very happy after that win that day. This is the famous scoreboard at Sixto Escobar Stadium that's named after Puerto Rico's first world boxing champion, a boxer named Sixto Escobar, who fought at 118 pounds. And one of his fights was, the referee was the famous Jack Dempsey. Next slide. This is not a very big photo, but it's a complete photo of the 50-51 Crabbers. Valmy is in the middle row. He's third left to right. He's seated next to Buster Clarkson. In the far back, you have Junior Gilliam, Bob Thurman, Ruben Gomez, Pepe Lucas, George Scales, and Zorrilla, who are kind of in the back there. But this is a very special team in Santurce history. Next slide, please. The Caribbean Series that year was played in Caracas, Venezuela. What's very interesting, and this has happened for many decades, is the winning team, Santurce, is able to choose players from other teams. So Santurce chose 4 regulars from Caguas, including Louis Olmo, who turned out to be the MVP of that series. Guigui Lucas, who was the brother of Pepe Lucas. A funny story about Guigui Lucas, the catcher. He was so scared of having his money stolen that during the games he would put his wallet in his back pocket instead of the locker room. And that story was relayed to me by Mickey Owen, who managed Guigui several years later. Ruben Gomez and Jose Santiago, nicknamed Pantalones, were both 2-0 for Santurce. A future New York Giants pitcher named Hoyt Wilhelm started 2 games for the Havana Reds in that series. Next slide. Yeah, here's a picture of Hoyt Wilhelm in his Havana Reds uniform. Because of his military service and other activities in the minor leagues, he did not make it to the big leagues until he was like 29 years old. But those 2 winters in Cuba were very helpful to him going into spring training of 1952. And, he was he pitched very well in Cuba, mostly as a starter, not as a reliever. Next slide, please. Valmy began his minor league career in Canada. And the provincial league was basically a league for older players, including some Latinos and players from the Negro leagues. Valmy had a very good season and made the All-Star team. He caught 54 games, but he also played second base. He played at 5'9", 165, which would, in today's standards, would be considered extremely small. Ruben Gomez actually pitched to Valmy quite a few times that summer, going 12-6. Cabrera was a disappointing 2-8. Valmy told me that he really did not like the cold weather. Ruben Gomez alerted me during an interview that he actually liked Canada, and Ruben actually wasn't bothered as much as Cabrera or Valmy by the cold weather in Canada. Next slide, please. And the winter 51-52, Valmy's second winter season, George Scales came back to manage Santurce. Valmy didn't hit as well, but he still was a regular catcher. That was a very tight pennant race that year because Santurce at 41-31 were 2 games behind San Juan and a game behind Caguas. So even though Santurce beat Caguas in the semis, they lost to their arch rivals 4-2 in the finals. Ruben Gomez, again, had a tremendous year, 14-7. And Willard Brown was somewhat disappointing that year. And Bob Thurman was very consistent, as were Clarkson and Junior Gilliam. Next slide, please. Interesting enough, Valmy Thomas was basically a free agent for a few summers. No major league organization decided to sign him, so he made some good money. He made $1,100 a month, which was a tremendous salary. Heck, that was more money than big league rookies made at that time. And the Lions of Escogido were considered the red team. Interesting enough, one of his 3 managers was the great Cuban ball player named Martin de Higo, who's in Cooperstown. And Feye Delgado was a scout who later became a scout for Charlie Finley's Kansas City and Oakland A's. And Dick C., who played for Santurce and also was a coach with Valmy, for Valmy Thomas with Santurce, was only managed 2 games. Valmy had a pretty good season, and Willard Brown, the great Willard Brown, played for Escogido, as did Pepe Lucas. Howard Easterling, one of my favorite players from Mount Olive, Mississippi, played with Satchel Paige in the Negro Leagues. And 2 of the best pitchers were Luis Arroyo from Puerto Rico, nicknamed Tite. Arroyo was the guy who saved a bunch of Whitey Ford's games with the 1961 New York Yankees. Johnny Wright was the teammate of Jackie Robinson with the 1946 Montreal Royals. And Johnny Wright, unfortunately, didn't really make it in the big leagues, with Brooklyn, but he was a very good pitcher in the Negro Leagues and in the Winter Leagues. Next slide, please. Going back to Santurce, Santurce wins another title. This time, the manager is Buster Clarkson, who was a player manager. Santurce came in second to San Juan, but then Santurce defeats the Lions of Ponce in the semis before they top San Juan in the finals. Ruben Gomez, Bobo Holloman, who had an interesting no-hitter for the St. Louis Browns in '53, and Dick Hoover were the best pitchers for Santurce. In one of the key games, actually in Game 6 of the final series, Valmy Thomas hit the winning 2-run triple that was nicknamed the Tomatazo in honor of his last name. That winter season, Ruben Gomez struck out 123, Holloman 80. They were 1-2 in strikeouts. Billy Bruton, who later played for the Milwaukee Braves, and Junior Gilliam each stole 15 bases. Ruben Gomez had another stellar year, pitched nearly 200 innings, 13-9, 1.78 ERA. In Game 1 of that final series with San Juan, Bobo Holloman actually pitched a 14-inning game, which is unheard of in today's baseball world. This is the reason I included Don Little, who I got to talk to. He was from Mount Carmel, Illinois. Little was the fellow that pitched against Vic Wertz when Wertz hit that long fly ball that Willie Mace made that acrobatic catch in Game 1 of the 1954 World Series. Well, Little told me that after he defeated Ruben Gomez that season in a very interesting pennant race, after Little won that game, he's walking off the mound, and all of a sudden he feels people putting things in his back pocket. Well, Little was given 3 $100 bills after that game against Gomez because a bunch of the fans had put a bet on Little winning that game, and the odds were for Gomez to win. So shortly after Little gets three $100 bills in his back pocket. A policeman with a billy club hits one of the fans, and Little found out that the police officer was angry when he found out that when he had evidence of the betting, but Little got to keep the $300. The police officer decided not to penalize Little for that. Next slide, please. In the Caribbean series in 1953, this was actually held in Havana, Cuba. It was the only time that a team from Puerto Rico won the Caribbean series in Havana. So that was, according to Ruben Gomez, he told me that was just, excuse me? Oh, Ruben Gomez told me that was just as important as winning Game 3 of the 1954 World Series. The rivalry between obviously the Cuban Winter League and the Puerto Rico Winter League was very intense. And if you look at some of the stats for the Santurce players, Junior Gilliam had an astronomical 545 batting average with 2 homers, 12 for 22. Vic Power played third base, the famous Gold Glove first baseman. Vic went 10 for 26, and he reminded me when I interviewed him that Roberto Clemente was dropped on Santurce's roster because the Santurce management felt that Vic Power had more experience and they needed an infielder. And Clemente was only 18 at the time, so they felt that Vic could do the job that Caribbean series. Bob Thurman hit well. The MVP was Willard Brown, who made it to the Cooperstown back in 2006. Willard Brown hit 4 homers, drove in 13 runs, and went 10 for 24. Next slide, please. Now we're going back to the Dominican Republic. Valmy was signed by the Licey Tigers, who won the Summer Winter League Championship that winter. A very good 36-18 team. Oscar Rodriguez managed them, and they defeated the team from the Águilas Ibaeñas, which is they're known as the Yellow Team, the team that later had a working agreement with the Pittsburgh Pirates for many years. Licey benefited from Valmy's catching and his hitting, hit 294. The lineup for the Licey Tigers that went that summer included Alonso Perry, hit 293, 11 homers, 52 ribbies. He played for the Birmingham Black Barons in the Negro Leagues. Bert Haas was the cleanup hitter, knocked in 40 runs, hit 326, and Luis Rodriguez Olmo from Puerto Rico, from Arecibo, Puerto Rico, was number 5 hitter. And I remember when I had an interview with Felipe Lu, I think it was in spring of 1993 when he was managing the Expos. Lou remembered those guys. Lou was a diehard Escogido Lions fan growing up. And Chichi Oliva was a good pitcher. Anyway, Licey had a very good team that winter. Next slide, please. I chose to include a photo of Felipe, who also very, very good career with the Giants as a player and manager. I mentioned that he rooted for Escogido. He also was very fond of Willard Brown and Bob Thurman because these two fellows obviously reinforced Escogido earning extra money during the summers. And Felipe noted that Valmy Thomas was a cerebral catcher and a team player. So Felipe was aware of Valmy Thomas as a baseball fan. Next slide, please. In 53-54, Santurce had a bad season. They finished last at 32-48. Valmy hit 225 for player manager Clarkson, but he played in 72. He played in 72 of Santurce's 80 games. Ruben Gomez was one of Santurce's best pitchers as usual, and Mickey Owen, who was the Caguas manager and the Caguas general manager and owner, decided to sign Ruben Gomez for the Caribbean Series, which came in handy because Ruben pitched a complete game for Caguas. Jack Sanford, who we'll learn about a little bit later, because Jack Sanford was traded for Ruben Gomez later on in the major leagues. Sanford pitched for the Ponce Lions and lost the game, but pitched okay in the Caribbean Series, pitching for Mickey Owen. And during the regular season with Ponce, Sanford had a very good ERA of 1.99. Santurce might have chosen Bob Turley. Caguas did not choose Bob Turley. The reason was Turley told me during the phone interview that 3 years earlier in 1951, Caguas had contacted Turley toward the end of the season to defeat Santurce, but they did not want to pay for his airfare, and that kind of angered Bob Turley. And Bob Turley told me that he decided that he was not going to reinforce Caguas in this Caribbean series. But fortunately, Caguas won it. Now, Hank Aaron, who was 19 at the time, going on 20, Hank Aaron would have wanted to play in the Caribbean series, but the Milwaukee Braves said that spring training was coming up in a few days, and they prohibited Hank Aaron from playing in the Caribbean series. So a guy named Bill Howerton with Mayagüez ended up hitting a game-winning homer against Cuba, and he replaced Hank Aaron. Mickey Owen told me that Googie Lucas had a little bit of a communication problem with some of the Caguas pitchers, so Mickey decided that he would catch most of the Caribbean series. Googie caught Game 6 for the Caguas Criollos. Next slide, please. Valmy's third and final season in the Dominican was with the Licey Tigers again, and he had a pretty good season. He hit 276 for Oscar Rodriguez again. However, Licey was defeated in the finals by the team they called the green team, with the green and white uniforms, the Estrellas Orientales. One of Valmy's teammates again was the great Alonso Perry, who was a terrific hitter. The Olivo brothers were solid starters. The Estrellas team that won the finals had Johnny El Gaucho Davis, who Jorge Delgado knows from Johnny Davis being a member of the Puerto Rico Professional Baseball Hall of Fame, which was resurrected by Jorge a few years ago. Earl Taborn, by the way, who preceded Elston Howard with the Kansas City Monarchs and was Elston's teammate with the Monarchs. Earl Taborn also preceded Valmy Thomas as Santurce's catcher between 1947, 48 and 49, 50. So I found that as an interesting fact, for this New York Giants presentation. So in 3 seasons in the Dominican, Valmy had a 270 batting average, very respectable, a 326 on base percentage, not a real high slugging percentage. He was more of a contact hitter, but Valmy did have a good eye, because if you notice, he had more walks, 45, than strikeouts, 32. And Valmy, 32 strikeouts in 555 at bats is actually very, very decent, very good. He had 202 finals. I think you might find this kind of amusing. In 1952, when he caught for Escogido, he found out that the cab drivers that were Escogido fans were take him anywhere. But if Valmy tried to catch a cab ride with the Licey fans, they would say, "No, sorry, I can't give you a cab ride." Well, in 53 and 54, Valmy also realized that the Escogido-friendly cab drivers were reluctant to drive him because he played for the blue team. He played for Licey. But if a Licey if a cab driver that was a big Licey fan saw Valmy after a game, he would drive him, and Valmy would give him a nice tip. So I think you might find that interesting. I did anyway. So this is a great season for Santurce, where you all probably may recall, or some may recall, that Herman Franks was commissioned to manage Santurce, and the great Willie Mays had a terrific year for Santurce, winning the batting title and batting 395. And Willie went 68 for 172 with 12 homers, 33 RBIs. Roberto Clemente scored 65 runs. Willie scored 63. They were 1-2 in the league. Buster Clarkson and Bob Thurman were 1-2 in runs batted in, 61-60. Willie Mays and teammate Don Zimmer tied for 4th place with 10 RBIs. Now, Harry Chitty, getting back to Valmy, Harry Chitty had been in the military most of 53 and 54. So Herman Franks opted to, when Pedrin Zorrilla signed Chitty, Herman Franks used Chitty quite a bit toward the end of the season in lieu of Valmy Thomas. However, Valmy did okay. Next slide. A friendship developed. Obviously, Ruben was already a friend of Mays going back to the 54 season championship season with the New York Giants, and they got along quite well. And Ruben told me that, and even in Puerto Rico, Willie all he did was drink cherry soda. But another advantage that Willie Mays had in Puerto Rico, as a teammate of Bill Greason's wife would cook home cooked meals for Willie at the apartment that they share at the apartment in Puerto Rico, and Willie Mays really enjoyed having that home cooking in Puerto Rico. Next slide, please. Harry Chitty, who I mentioned, was a catcher for the Chicago Cubs and some other teams. I believe he might have been from Memphis. Well, actually, he passed. He had a connection to Memphis, Tennessee, and to Illinois, and was a pretty good home run hitter. Here's a slide. Bill Greason, who wore number 18 for Santurce, had some pretty good seasons for Santurce, and had one brief season with the Mayagüez Indios. Sam Jones, actually, this is a good trivia question for you. Who was the MVP of the 1954-55 Puerto Rico Winter League? Was it A, Willie Mays, or B, Sam Jones, or C, Bill Greason? Would anybody care to answer that?
And I guess Sam Jones.
Yes, it sure was. It was a good. You get some kind of a prize, which I can't really mention.
I gotta tell you, Tom. Bill Grease, he looks exactly the same.
Yeah,
same face. I mean, I know it's the same guy, but he's 100 years old now, right?
Yeah, he's 100. Yeah. And he was back. That picture was taken when Bill Greason was age 30, and the rotation was Sam Jones, Ruben Gomez, and Bill Greason were 1, 2, 3. They really didn't need much else. I mean, Herman Franks told me that with a couple of other starting pitchers, this Santurce 54-55 team probably might have been in the pennant race in the National League. They were a little short on starting pitchers for a 154-game season. But if you consider the fact that they had Willie in center, Clemente in left, and Bob Thurman in right, who had a really good throwing arm, and Valmy and Chitty behind the plate, they had George Crow at first base, Ronnie Samford at second, Don Zimmer at short, and Buster Clarkson in third. Louis Olmo and Gerard were the fourth and fifth outfielders and good pinch hitters. It was a very good team, really the best Winter League team of that era. Zimmer actually was the MVP. This is another trivia question. Zimmer outvoted Willie Mays for MVP of the 1955 Caribbean Series hosted by Caracas, even though Willie had a higher batting average, 440, and a higher slugging percentage, 880. Somehow the Venezuelan sports writers, I guess they called Zimmer the toy soldier, and they kind of were enchanted with Zimmer's attitude or whatever. And I think they were a little bit angry at Mays because in Game 3 of that 55 Caribbean Series, a Venezuelan pitcher named Ramon Monsant was pitching in the bottom of the 11th inning in a tie 2-2 game, and the winner of that game would win the Caribbean Series. Well, Willie Mays, like at 12:02 a.m., hits a 2-run homer, walk-off homer off Monsant with Clemente on first to score the winning run. And the Venezuelan fans were so disappointed. And this is my gut feeling. I think that Willie Mays' walk-off home run was one of the reasons why the sports writers gave Zimmer the MVP vote. But, just an interesting observation. My book, about a year ago, my book on the Caribbean Series was published. If you look at the cover here, if you look on, I guess you're far right, Willie Mays wearing number 24 is about to step on home plate after that dramatic 2-run homer. And believe it or not, Willie was 0 for 11 before that home run. So the Venezuelan fans were booing Willie and saying, how can the great New York Giants, Willie Mays, be such a failure in Venezuela? So when Willie hits that 2-run homer, everything got real quiet. And anyway, so I want to transition now. But this is a slide going into the next season. In 55-56, Willie does not play any more winter ball. But guess what? Willie's friend and Willie's kid brother, Orlando Cepeda, at age 18, joins the Crabbers as a backup first baseman to a very good hitter and fielder named Bill White. Roberto Clemente comes back to play for Santurce, has another good year. Herman Franks has a second year managing the Crabbers. Roberto, if you recall, in 1966 was the National League MVP. the first MVP from Puerto Rico. Orlando Cepeda becomes the 67 MVP for the Cardinals, who also win the World Series that year. They both are inducted in Cooperstown 26 years apart. Next slide, please. Herman Franks told me that he thought Santurce was the better team, but not to make excuses. Don Zimmer suffers he has basically a ruptured appendix, and that really Zimmer was the spark plug of that team. The loss of Zimmer hurt Santurce, and somehow I believe this was kind of strange. I still today, 7 years later, don't understand why Santurce trades a very good infielder, New York Giants prospect Darrell Spencer, for an old outfielder named Allie Clark, because Spencer comes back to haunt Santurce in the finals. It also is interesting that Orlando Cepeda hits his first Puerto Rico League homer off the Ponce Lions, managed by Mickey Owen. Mickey Owen later became a sheriff in Greene County, Missouri, which is actually where Springfield is. And Mickey had a great memory, and Mickey remembered that home run by Cepeda. By the way, Mickey also was responsible for Hank Aaron being moved from second base to right field. It was Mickey Owen who told the Caguas management several years earlier, Caguas was a couple of days from kicking Hank Aaron away. Aaron was in a slump, and they felt that they could get a better second baseman. So Mickey Owen made a phone call and brought Charlie Neal to play second base. But Mickey Owen sent Hank Aaron to right field and started hitting him fungo flies. And all of a sudden, Hank Aaron relaxed at the plate and became a great hitter. So that's a great story of Mickey Owen helping Hank Aaron a few years earlier. Next slide, please. That winter of 55-56, Valmy catches. One of my favorite interviews was with Steve Ridzik, who just a great guy. He may not have had great stats, but in some years, but he was just a very nice fellow, and he was a terrific pitcher that winter. Al Worthington also gave me a couple of quotes. Al Worthington seemed very decent human being. Ridzik and Worthington and Ruben Gomez and Greason were really good. And at the halfway point, before Carl Hubbard arrives in Puerto Rico, that quartet was 25-11. But as I mentioned a minute ago, I think the injury to Don Zimmer and the trade of Darrell Spencer probably hurt Santurce big time. Now, Carl Hubbell at the time was the minor league coordinator for the Giants, and Pedrin Soria, paid for his trip, or I guess in conjunction with the Giants, they paid for Hubbell to spend a few days in Puerto Rico. And of course, Bill White was the regular first baseman. At that time, Santurce had a very close working agreement with the Crabbers, and Zorrilla and Horace Stoneham were good buddies at that time. In 56-57, Valmy again hits a couple of homers, hits 263. By the way, he was a workhorse that winter, plays in 70 of 72 games, so he didn't take very many days off that winter. But unfortunately, Zorrilla was in debt. So the franchise was losing a lot of money. Zorrilla was such a nice guy. He paid some of the top salaries in Puerto Rico at the time. And he sold Clemente, Juan Pizarro, and Ronnie Sanford to the Caguas team for $30,000 to erase the team debt. See, one of the preconditions of the new ownership was that Pedrin had to get the money into the bank so that the new owner would be on stable financial footing. Ironic, those of you who, I don't know how many of you like Sandy Koufax, but the only time Sandy Koufax was a bonus baby, if you recall, the Brooklyn, never pitched in the minors. However, Brooklyn did send him to Puerto Rico, and he was 3-6. He was a little bit wild that year, but in his last Puerto Rico start, he pitched a 2-hit shutout versus the Crabbers, and Clemente got Santurce's only 2 hits. One of the reasons Caguas released him was that they had a new rule that year that said that only 3 big leaguers, active big leaguers, could be on minor league teams. And the Caguas management felt that of the 3 leaguers on the Caguas roster, Koufax was the least experienced. So believe it or not, Koufax was given his walking papers. He later became a very good pitcher in Los Angeles. But anyway, and I have a cousin named Brian Goldberg in Los Angeles who idolizes Koufax. Here's a picture of Valmy with the New York Giants. It's not a great picture, but in Let me say something before I get into the New York Giants. I did not put a slide about Valmy's 1956 summer with Minneapolis briefly, with Allentown Dukes and with the Johnstown Johnnies, but he hit quite well. Let me say real quickly the reason why Valmy did not play very much with Minneapolis under Eddie Stanky. Valmy only played 3 games, had 5 at-bats with 2 hits. Valmy hated the cold weather, and it can get very cold in Minneapolis in the spring. So Valmy basically said, I want to go home. And apparently he was told by Bill White, who was his teammate at the time. Bill White said, hey, Valmy, in 1956, Valmy, if you go home, the New York Giants are never going to promote you to the big team. But Valmy says, I prefer the Virgin Islands Sun to Minneapolis. But long story short, they agreed, Valmy agreed to play for Albuquerque, which had better weather, and for the Johnstown Johnnies. And I think one of his managers that summer was Frank Genovese. Another manager was a former catcher named Bob Swift. Bob Swift was a longtime catcher with the Detroit Tigers, who was a good influence on Valmy with the Albuquerque team. Valmy hit very well for Albuquerque. Next slide, please. With the 1957 New York Giants, they did not have a very good season before moving on to San Francisco. Ruben Gomez did win 15 games, so he was okay. But a lot of the other pitchers had tough seasons. But Valmy actually, hit 6 home runs. By the way, Valmy's very first home run with the New York Giants came against the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 15th inning. I think it came on May 11th, 1957, against a relief pitcher named Don, is it Bessent? Bessent. It came at the Polo Grounds. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember that, but it came. It was a New York Giants victory. It was his first home run in the big leagues, and it was his walk-off home run. So that was a big day for Valmy. And apparently Bill Rigney really appreciated Valmy's catching most of that summer. Ray Cott, by the way, turned out to be, Ray Cott was the backup catcher. And I'm going to get into Ray Cott later on in this presentation. Ruben Gomez liked Ray Cott a lot too. And I believe Ray played for the 54 New York Giants and was a decent catcher. Wes Restrom was also another good catcher. Didn't play much that summer. Here's some of Willie Mays' great stats that year for his last year with the New York Giants. By the way, if you remember, 1957 was the very first year that Major League Baseball awarded Gold Gloves. And in 1957, I believe, it was just Major League Gold Gloves. Starting in 1958, it was broken down by American National League. So Willie Mays was the first, I believe, Willie Mays was the first center fielder to earn a Gold Glove in Major League history. Next, and Ozzie Virgil, I have his stats there. In 57, 58, transitioning to Santurce, Valmy starts hitting the ball pretty well after his Giant season. The San Francisco, however, the Crabbers are swept by Caguas in the championship year. Bill Greason has a good year. Juan Pizarro is pitching for Caguas, and unfortunately, and Clemente has a very good final series. Real quickly, Maury Wills led the Winter League with 25 steals for Mickey Owen. Mickey Owen was one of the fellows that encouraged Maury Wills to become a switch hitter. So that was another contribution that Mickey Owen made to Maury Wills' career. Next slide. And I better hurry because we're getting into the 7:45 or so, 7:49. Valmy reinforces Caguas in the Caribbean Series. Unfortunately, Caguas is defeated by the Cuban team, Marianao. Roberto Clemente plays center field in that Caribbean Series, has a great Caribbean Series, but the MVP is Earl Batty, a catcher for Valencia, Venezuela. But Valmy did catch a great gem by Juan Pizarro, who had 17 strikeouts. That is still a record in Caribbean Series history for most strikeouts in a game. Next slide. Valmy with the San Francisco Giants, 1958. Next slide, please. The Giants had a decent year, 80 and 74, propelled by Willie Mays, terrific Willie Mays, 10.2 WAR above replacement. Felipe played some, so did Jackie Brandt. Bill White played some. However, Bob Schmidt caught the majority of the games Valmy was the backup. Cepeda was rookie of the year. Ruben Gomez had a lackluster 10 and 12 year. Johnny Antonelli was still pretty good. Worthington had a decent year for the Giants. So did Marv Grissom. Next slide, please. This is a photo taken before opening day. This was on income tax deadline day, April 15th, 1958. The great Willie Mays next to Duke Snider, two of the best center fielders in Major League Baseball. Next slide. Now the next few slides highlight the San Francisco's 8-0 win over the Dodgers. Gino Cimoli was the very first Major League batter in a game in California. Those of you might be familiar with Galileo High School. That's where he went to high school. Jimmy Davenport, who was actually from Alabama, not too far from where I'm tonight. Davenport actually was a pretty good third baseman. Ruben Gomez was pretty consistent that day. Valmy Thomas and Ruben had a good chemistry. I believe that helped account for that victory. Valmy scored the second run. Next slide, please. This is just a chronology of the game. Darrell Spencer hit the first home run. I believe Spencer hit the first home run in San Francisco Giants history. And Rory Costello can offer, in the Q&A session, Rory Costello can offer a brief word about his interview. I want to thank Rory Costello, who actually wrote the magnificent Sabre bio of Valmy Thomas. Rory also told me that Valmy had a droll, D-R-O-L-L sense of humor. I guess maybe Valmy Thomas had something in common with a comedian, Bob Newhart. They had a dry sense of humor. Orlando Cepeda hit the second homer in Giants history. Here's a photo of Mays on the right, Valmy in the middle during a pregame batting session. I assume they got along quite well. I mean, Willie got along with everybody. Next slide, please. Won't go into every detail. However, the Giants, lead goes to 8-0. In the top of the ninth, Gomez gets Ferrillo, Roseboro, Junior Gilliam, a teammate of Gomez, former Santurce teammate, draws a walk, but Pee Wee Reese strikes out to end the game. This is very interesting. Mays made a great fifth inning catch off Pee Wee Reese in the fifth inning, and a newspaper person said that Mays told him it was like similar to the 1954 World Series, so it must have been a very good catch. I wasn't there. I was in Puerto Rico at the time, but that's what the newspaper guy wrote. Next slide, please. This is just a recreation of the legendary Gary Mintz at the top of the screen. This must have been some former presentation where one of the presenters actually had the program and some of the autographs from that April 15th, 1958 game that featured homers by Darrell Spencer and Cepeda, and Gomez a shutout. So anyway, next slide. Santurce did win the pennant in 58-59. Gomez had another good year. Orlando Cepeda won the batting title. Jackie Brandt came in second. Jackie Brandt is a terrific guy. Elmo Plaskett from the U.S. Virgin Islands had some injuries later on, but he was a very good winter league hitter in Puerto Rico. Next slide. This is kind of the beginning of the end. At that time, San Francisco and Santurce still had the working agreement because Bill Rigney, Stoneham, and Tom Sheehan made a visit to Puerto Rico and the Dominican. You can see the names of some of the guys they checked on, including Ruben Gomez and so on. But guess what happened? That winter, San Francisco, the Giants trade Gomez and Valmy to the Phillies for Jack Sanford. Interesting enough, Jackie Brandt, this was the salary at the time, made $800 a month in Puerto Rico and $250 a month for living expenses. And a maid helped him out. And Brandt was a big horse racing buff, so he enjoyed the horse races and playing golf with the legendary Chichi Rodriguez. Next slide, please. In the Caribbean Series, this time in Caracas, Venezuela, Cuba, Tommy Lasorda pitched for the Almendares team, and Valmy did do quite well, actually, in that series. He and Jackie Brandt, if you look at the very end of the slide, Jackie Brandt and Valmy were named to the 59 Caribbean Series All-Star team. Norm Cash played for Venezuela, so you had some good players. Orlando Cepeda hit pretty well. Here's a photo of Jackie with the Giants. He's originally from Nebraska. He later told me that he drove, I think, for UPS after he stopped baseball. With the Phillies in 1959, Ruben Gomez had a disappointing season, 3-8. Valmy was a backup catcher, pretty much. Carl Sawatsky. Ironically, Sparky Anderson only had 1 year in the big leagues, so our Sparky was Valmy Thomas's teammate with the 59 Phillies, along with Hall of Famers Richie Ashburn and Robin Roberts. Sanford was 15-12, so the trade actually benefited the Giants. Sam Jones was 21-15 for San Francisco, a former teammate of Valmy's in Puerto Rico. Next slide. This is the end of the era where San Francisco got a little bit annoyed with Santurce because, number one, Santurce fired a guy named Ray Murray, who managed in the Giants system with the Corpus Christi team. And Jack Schwartz, who was a high-level official with the Giants farm system, was not very happy with this. And Schwartz was also annoyed that he wanted Santurce to play Cepeda more in left field because a guy named Willie McCovey was being groomed to be the first baseman for San Francisco. Next slide. This is just a summary of Valmy's years in the early 60s. He had a decent year, very good year in the Pacific Coast League with Indianapolis. And then with the Crabbers, Crabbers had an off year. Louis Olmo managed Santurce that year, the great outfielder. 61 Cleveland, Valmy makes some friends in Cleveland. Vic Power, of course, is a great Gold Glover there. The Jimmy Pearsall, who was known for other reasons, played center field. Mudcat Grant was probably the best pitcher that year. Barry Latman was a very good pitcher too. 61-62 was probably one of the highlights of Valmy's career that he mentioned to me. He catches Bob Gibson and Juan Pizarro were the fastest throwing pitchers in Puerto Rico. That winter, Ed Bautau, who I did the Sabre bio for, Craig Anderson, who became a good friend of mine, were also pitchers that winter. Next slide, please. Santurce was 43-37. Back then, winter ball was very good. Frank Howard, the condominium, played for Caguas. So did Louis Tiant. Clemente played half a season with San Juan. Arecibo had Bob Euchre. Euchre gave me one quote. He said that he liked Louis Olmo. He said that Louis Olmo was one of his favorite managers. So that Euchre didn't have time to say much else, but he did compliment Louis Olmo. Mo Drabowski told me that he enjoyed winter ball. Craig Anderson, who I mentioned, was one of the starters for the Mets in the early 60s, enjoyed pitching to Valmy Thomas very much because Valmy knew all the hitters and helped Craig Anderson in the finals and in the postseason very, very, very much. In the semifinals, Santurce defeats Caguas 4-3. In the finale, Juan Pizarro outduels Louis Tiant in a great game. Tiant told me in an interview I had with him that he never forgot the name Martin Beltran because Beltran never played big leagues, but Tiant never forgot that guy because of that home run. Gibson came of age in that finals, and then in the finals here, Gibson has 14 strikeouts. He outpitches Joel Horlin. Valmy's 2-run single in Game 3 helps Juan Pizarro win a 3-1 game, and Cepeda hits a decisive homer off Bobby Dusto. Next slide, please. We go to the Inter-American Series, which is basically because this is thanks to Fidel Castro. We no longer have a Caribbean Series. However, we agree upon for the first 4 or 5 years of the early to mid 60s, there's an Inter-American Series. Santurce goes 8-1, and thanks to Pizarro and Gibson and Orlando Pena, Santurce dominates. Valmy catches 8 of the 9 games, including basically the first 8 games. Next slide, please. Let's see. In the middle slide here, yeah, he caught Gibson again for a second time, and Sherman Jones is a loser. Craig Anderson basically comes in relief and saves it. Santurce, the only loss is to Mike was 12-8. Tiant gets the win, and Roberto Arbosa gets the loss in relief. And there are a bunch of home runs, including Tiant himself hits a homer in that game. Next slide. This is the last series ever played at Escobar Stadium. Escobar Stadium is basically ends its career as a Winter League stadium, but Santurce goes 8-1, Caracas 5-4, Mayagüez 4-5, and the Marlboro Smokers lasted at 1-8. Miguel de Los hits a walk-off homer to finish the 5-4 win against the Mayagüez Indios. Elrod Hendricks actually catches that game. Vern Benson gave Valmy a rest in that game. Next slide, please. This is just a summary. Some of the stats. Here are the Santurce hitting stats versus the other teams. Next slide. The fielding stats, and finally, toward the end of Valmy's career, this is kind of interesting. He plays for the Jacksonville Suns and Atlanta Crackers that summer. He's suspended for an altercation, which Rory Costello could elaborate on. But Valmy, and with Jacksonville, gets to connect with Ruben Gomez and a left-handed pitcher named Tommy John, who became more famous for arm surgery, I guess, Tommy John surgery. Louis Tiant again, and here are the fireworks. Let's go to the next one, please. The next slide. Yes, I think Rory Costello is more of an expert than I am here, but there was a certain love triangle that Valmy Thomas got involved in that resulted in Valmy being shot in the chest by a musician who was also a mortician named Cleveland Lyons. Ironically, Cleveland Lyons later commits suicide, and at his funeral, the eulogy is performed by the very well-known Dr. Martin Luther King, which is another interesting story. But Valmy did return to health in time for his final year with Santurce, and Valmy was one of the reasons why Ray Cott manages Santurce, because Ray and Ruben Gomez both put in a good word for Ray Cott. They both like the guy. Real quickly, I have Jack Sanford apparently wrote a book, and I think this photo was where he's hugging Willie McCovey after a game against the Yankees in early October in the '62 World Series. And ironically, the foreword for this book is written by Louis Tiant and the prologue by Sam McDowell. Next slide, please. And talking about Sam McDowell pitches for Santurce that winter for Ray Cott, and Santurce makes it to the semis. Pizarro and McDowell were number 2 and number 5 in strikeouts. Craig Anderson joins the team to help them down the stretch. McDowell told me that he remembers that the great heavyweight champion Joe Louis came to the new Iran Bithorn Stadium for Game 3 to throw out the first pitch, or to attend the game. It went 19 innings. Jim Rivera won the game. Here's a depiction of Iran Bithorn Stadium during the daytime. It's a nice stadium, still in use. And unfortunately for Ray Cott, during Game 6 of that semifinal series, Craig Anderson told me that he had a lead going into in the 6th inning, and Ellie Hendricks hits a home run. However, Valmy is hit by a pitch by this, I can't pronounce the guy's last names, Sitouris. He later pitched for the Cincinnati Reds, I think, but he hits Valmy Thomas, and Valmy basically starts fighting John. And during the fight, Ray Cott tries to separate him, but is hurt, has a big time injury. And according to an interview I had with McDowell, Ray Cott tore his heel in the fight. And basically, he loses his job to manage the '63 Cleveland Indians because he was on crutches for 6 months. So that's an interesting story in itself. And here's some of Valmy's stats. In minor leagues, much higher batting average, obviously, than the majors, but very consistent. Puerto Rico, Dominican, minors, and majors. Next slide. He hits .264 in the Caribbean Series. Good defensive player. According to Rory Costello, saber buyer. He was a civic official, sporting goods businessman. I met him at the centennial birth of Pedrin Zorrilla. He lived to be nearly 85. Caught the first shutout in Giants history. Next slide, please. Here's some of the ex-Crabbers in Cooperstown. It's a litany of tremendous players. I highlighted a few, like that played with Valmy, with Santurce. Dandridge, of course, played for Minneapolis, so he was not a teammate. He was with Santurce earlier, but not when Valmy played. Next slide, please. Tommy Lasorda did pitch to Valmy with the 53-54 Crabbers. Orlando was his teammate. Willard Brown was his teammate. 21 ex-Santurce Crabbers are enshrined in Cooperstown. That's quite a quite a distinguished list. And and I think we're coming to the end here. I want to obviously thank all these people, namely people like Valmy Thomas, Craig Anderson, Ruben Gomez, Mickey Owen, just to name a few, Diana Sorrilla, Jorge Colon Delgado for sure, and of course the biographer, Rory Costello, tremendous bio. He's a tremendous writer, Rory is, and chairs the bio committee. And next one, and these are just a couple of cover photos from my older books about the Winter League and the Crabbers. It is 7:05 p.m., but so my presentation has ended, but do we have time, Gary, for a few questions?
Absolutely. I got Tom. I don't know anybody more thorough than you. I got to tell you.
Well,
Those pictures and the statistics and your knowledge, remembering all the stuff is just amazing. So kudos to you. I found it very interesting. So he was pretty much a good defensive catcher, little hitting, but he was in the majors and of course played for the Giants franchise both in New York and in San Francisco. Let's open it up to Mars.
Thank you for the presentation. You took us down memory lane. So when the Giants left New York in 57, I was 10. And a lot of the names that you mentioned in the presentation, here's some that besides Valmy, Willie Kirkland, Darrell Spencer, Monzant, Worthington, and then of course you mentioned Sandy Koufax. And I saw Sandy Koufax pitch garbage time in the Polo Grounds where he couldn't get the ball over the plate. But my question is, because Valmy also played with the 1960 Orioles that Paul Richards managed, and Hoyt Wilhelm was on that team. I vaguely remember that Paul Richards, being a major league catcher and then a manager of the Baltimore Orioles, developed a huge catcher's mitt that Valmy and other catchers used to catch Hoyt Williams' knuckleball. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point because if you remember, I think Paul Richards also was a teammate of Hank Greenberg's with the 1945 Detroit Tigers when the Tigers won the World Series. And I think I talked to a catcher named Hector Valle from Puerto Rico, and I think Hector caught Sandy Koufax with the 65 Dodgers briefly. And I think Hector did tell me that, and Hector knew Valmy Thomas from Puerto Rico, and maybe in a conversation they had, Valmy said some nice words about Paul Richards, about Paul Richards being very astute and maybe like you're saying, maybe trying to find ways to minimize pass balls. But I did not specifically talk to Valmy about Wilhelm or Paul Richards, but I think through Hector Valle I got some insights on that. So
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mars. Okay. Harvey Weinberg.
Tom, I second Gary's comment. You are thorough and it's interesting. And what I particularly like following is your exquisite pronunciation of Spanish players, Hispanic players. And when you were talking about Harry Chitty in the Bronx, we referred to him as Harry Cheaty. And that's my introduction to the comment that Harry Cheaty, and I actually remembered this, and then I cheated a little bit and went on Wikipedia. Harry Cheaty has the distinction of being the only player to have been traded for himself. Right?
Right. I remember that.
And he was traded from Cleveland to the New York Mets, and then for a player to be named later. And then he was traded for that player to be named later, which was him.
Yeah, wasn't that 1962?
It certainly was.
Yeah, and real quickly here, there's also a connection between Chidi and Ray Cott, because Cott, I believe, was a coach, and a friend of Valmy Thomas and Ruben Gomez with the 62 Indians. So it's funny how baseball has the circular way of connecting people.
And I have a question. I don't know if this is fair play, but how much knowledge do you have of the present situation going on? The Giants today, the San Francisco Giants today announced they signed a 17-year-old shortstop, Luis Hernandez, from Venezuela. And of course, with the I don't know what else to call it, the situation involving Venezuela. What can you add anything? I mean, it's a situation that has a lot of questions that are unanswered, and maybe baseball isn't the most important issue, but to this group, baseball is important.
I mentioned some of that has to do with international money that they have, and maybe they feel that they got a gem. I'm not real familiar with him. I can say that from Puerto Rico, Carlos Correa, who's still a big leaguer, was like the #1 overall draft pick by Houston, I think back in 2012. But Puerto Rico, see, the problem, one of the issues is that the Puerto Rican kids have to compete with the junior college and the collegiate kids in the United States, whereas the Venezuelans, the Cubans, and the Dominicans are looked at separately. So maybe the Giants saw something in him. I believe there's still scouts at these games. I mean, before this recent incursion, So, but I'm not really privy to why or the particulars of that signing. I'm not real on top of that one.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much.
Paul, you're up, Paul.
Yeah, Tom, that was just really terrific. My question is rather a basic one. So if we assume that for the major leagues that the season ends in October, and so then they go down to the Caribbean to play in the Caribbean League in the winter, and then they have to report in February for spring training. And so the time frame, if I'm understanding it correctly, the time frame for playing games in the Caribbean during these leagues was what, November, December, January?
Right, because for example, the current like back in the old days, I mean, let's say in the 50s and 60s, they might start third week of October, and they would go into the playoffs would end in late January. The Caribbean Series would be held first couple of weeks of February. Now currently, there's a decree. The Caribbean Series has to start no later than February 1st, and has to end before the Super Bowl, and hopefully no later than February 8th, because now the decree says that you have to end the Caribbean Series hopefully 1 week before pitchers report to spring training. But when Hank Aaron was prohibited from playing in the 1954 Caribbean Series, Milwaukee, was fairly new. It was Boston Braves, then Milwaukee Braves, and I think the Braves, spring training might have started a little bit earlier at the time, and the Winter League season went on longer. If you recall, back in the early 50s, Puerto Rico played 80 games. Right now, they only play a 40-game regular season. And the other thing that's happened in recent years is you have the Arizona Instructional League. So a lot of your major league teams, for budget reasons and injury reasons, are reluctant to send their top prospects to Puerto Rico, Dominican, and Venezuela. They'll just send them to Arizona. That's been happening in the last several decades.
So when they went down to play in those leagues in the winter, did the teams have to give them permission to be able to do that?
In some cases, yes. For example, Harvey Haddix, the left-handed pitcher, Harvey Haddix, told me that the St. Louis Cardinals, he had been in the Korean War, so that in 1953, he told me, even back then, he said that his contract said that he could only pitch until mid-December because the Cardinals did not want to risk an injury. That was a little bit unusual because at that time, a lot of the players were allowed to play the whole season, but occasionally Harvey Haddix, Bob Gibson wrote to me that the Cardinals wanted to develop him and wanted him to pitch in the postseason. So in the case of Bob Gibson in the early 60s, the Cardinals had no problem with him pitching in Puerto Rico until mid-February because they wanted to get him, I guess they wanted to get him fine-tuned and really motivate him to pitch better in the big leagues. So it was very interesting how that could work. But I think back in the 50s, for the most part, there weren't the restrictions that you have now. Back in the 90s, Billy Wagner, who's in the Hall of Fame recently, Billy Wagner told me that he was on a 6-week contract and he could only pitch 30 innings. So it kind of varies by player. And they're special, and they're now I hear there could be some restrictions in terms of pitch counts. But like I said earlier, the best pitching prospects don't go to Puerto Rico. It's usually like maybe into some independent ball, veteran Puerto Rican pitchers. So the whole equation has changed.
Okay.
But the Puerto Rico League right now, Santurce is playing Ponce in the finals, and I think they've done some good things to bring the fans back. And they're trying to, and they get a few prospects. They get some prospects, but not like when Willie Mays played or when Paul Blair played for Santurce.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Tom, you had one slide that I really went by really fast because Jim Mully's guy, I think, had an ERA of 6, and I didn't want him to stare at that. So, Jim, that's why I moved it very quickly.
Yeah, but notice he followed up with 2 good years after 57. So just remember that.
Ed, you're up. Bring us home, Ed.
Just a comment, not a question. I thank you for the presentation. You mentioned Valmy Thomas's home run in that Brooklyn Dodgers at the Polo Grounds game. I was not at that game, but I did go to the Saturday game, which I believe Valmy caught. I know Johnny Podgers pitched for the Dodgers and shut us out 2-0. And we had a great time. We went down there with a busload of World War II veterans, who they were still young then, to the Polo Grounds and met other people there. But the thing is, it turned out to be my last game. And everybody there had no idea that they were going to pull the rug out from underneath us. Now, this is beginning of May. So just a comment I did there. And we did enjoy the game. The Giants lost, but we didn't know what was going to happen soon. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Why don't we all give it up for Tom? And I also want to thank Tom's guests for showing up as well. Tom Van Hyning. Tom, just fabulous as always.
Could Rory Costello may have a comment. Could he be activated?
Absolutely.
Could he?
Yep. Rory, go ahead.
I just wanted to just compliment Tom's detailed work by mentioning that I made a special project of interviewing all the Virgin Islands veterans of the major leagues in 1999. And it turned out to be just a little self-published book of around 60-some pages that I produced. And the pleasure that I had in interviewing Valmy Thomas was just, he was such a funny man and he was such a great personality. And if you have the time, I'd encourage you to just not only look into what Tom has provided, but just Google Saber Valmy Thomas and you can read all about him and his life and his personality.
And Rory, I will tell you one thing, and I've mentioned it to Tom, maybe you and him can collaborate on the legacy of the New York and San Francisco Giants Latino players that Horace Stoneham brought to the major leagues.
Well, I'll mention one other thing quickly in passing, too. You know who Valmy's roommate was in 1957 with the Giants?
Anybody?
No.
That was Andre Rogers.
There you go.
From the
They put the
Bahamas.
Caribbeans together.
But anyway, thank you so much, Rory, for coming tonight. And I think Jorge Colon Delgado's here. So thanks for supporting Tom. Why don't we all give it up for Tom Van Hyning again? Tom, thanks so much. We will reconvene next Thursday with John McLaughlin. Until then, I'm going to pause if anybody wants to talk about the Giants. One last thing. It looks like we might be getting Tito Fuentes to address us in May. So
cool.
I think that's going to work out. So, all right. So good night, everybody. And I'm just going to pause this so we can continue talking off the record. Good night, everybody. See you Thursday. Celebrate and honor Martin Luther King on Monday.